Mama, please, it's Christmas. Her small voice shook as the snow fell harder, settling on her tangled hair like cold feathers. 7-year-old Ella knelt beside a lonely grave, her bare knees pressed into the ice, her tiny hands clasped so tight they trembled. "Other kids get presents," she whispered, breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. "But I don't need toys. I don't need anything big. I just want a small Christmas gift. Something to remind me you still see me." Her words broke like thin glass. She wiped her tears with frozen fingers, then leaned forward and placed a wilted flower on the grave. "Mama, if you can hear me. I'm trying to be strong, but it's getting really hard." Her voice dissolved into the wind, soft, shaking, almost swallowed by the falling snow. She didn't think anyone heard her. But someone did. A man walking through the cemetery stopped as if struck. His breath stilled. The flowers in his hand slipped toward the snow. Something unexplainable pulled him toward the sound of that child's Christmas prayer, a sound so fragile it felt like his own heart might break with it. He turned toward her. Slowly. Carefully. As if stepping toward a moment he wasn't meant to interrupt, yet couldn't walk away from. And in the quiet winter air, between a child's desperate Christmas wish and a stranger's trembling breath, everything began to change. But neither of them knew it yet. Before we begin this story, I want to ask you something. If you had walked past that cemetery, if you had heard that little girl praying in the cold, if you had seen her tiny hand shaking, begging God for just a small Christmas gift, would you have stopped? Would you have knelt beside her? Would you have done what Jonathan did? If your answer is yes, tap the like button right now. Show the world that kindness still exists. And if you believe no child should ever cry alone on Christmas, comment, "I would stop for her." Because this story, this miracle, this reunion that fate almost prevented, it begins with a child's trembling prayer. And it continues with people like you, people who choose compassion over silence. Now, take a breath. Let's begin the story of Ella. Jonathan Hale was a man the world recognized long before he ever spoke a single word. His name echoed through boardrooms, business magazines, and billionaire lists with the weight of success and fear interwoven. People called him untouchable, powerful, cold. The kind of man whose presence could silence an entire room without him lifting his head. They whispered about his fortune, admired his empire, and envied his power. But only a handful of people in his entire lifetime had ever known the truth about him. Jonathan Hale was a man built out of grief. He had everything: wealth, influence, respect. But one loss had carved through him so deeply that nothing ever filled the hollow space it left behind. His sister, Amelia, the only person who reminded him he had a heart. The only one who could reach him when the world felt too heavy, too loud, too unkind. And even now, years after she was gone, he still felt her absence like a constant cold beneath his ribs. He had buried her on Christmas Eve, and ever since that year, he returned to her grave on the same night, at the same hour, carrying the same white roses she used to love. Every December 24th, Jonathan set aside everything, meetings, celebrations, obligations, and walked alone through the old cemetery at the edge of the city. There were no paparazzi there. No assistants hovering, no investors questioning him. No mother criticizing him. No memories he didn't choose to face. Just silence. Just snow. Just Amelia. The world softened around him in that cemetery, and for a few minutes each year, he wasn't the billionaire who controlled everything he touched. He was simply a man who had lost the one person who ever held him accountable, and the only one who ever loved him unconditionally. This year, the snow fell heavier than usual. Thick flakes drifted through the air, settling on the black wool of Jonathan's coat. His breath formed brief, visible clouds as he walked the path he knew by heart, down the older section, past the iron gate, around the small hill where the largest oak tree leaned over the graves like a guardian from another era. Jonathan carried the roses carefully. White. Fresh. Beautiful. Amelia had always said white roses were gentle strength, a reminder that softness was not weakness, but courage in its purest form. Jonathan never forgot that. He just didn't live it anymore. The crunch of snow beneath his shoes echoed softly, swallowed by the stillness of the place. He welcomed the cold. He welcomed the numbness. It kept him from feeling the ache in his chest, the ache that never really left. But tonight, this year, there was something different in the air. Subtle. Fragile. Like a thread pulling him slightly off his usual path. At first, he dismissed it. A sound too faint to register, carried by the wind. A soft hiccuping breath. The kind a child might make after crying for too long. Jonathan paused. Tilted his head. Listened. There it was again. Barely a whisper. Barely a voice. He blinked, uncertain. Children didn't come to cemeteries alone. Not at night. Not in winter. Not on Christmas Eve. He almost moved on. Almost. But then he heard words. God, please, it's Christmas. Jonathan's entire body went still. The voice was small, so small he felt something inside him tighten instantly, like a cord pulled taut. It was a little girl's voice, trembling, breaking, filled with a desperation no child should ever carry alone. He followed the sound slowly, carefully. The roses felt heavier in his hands. The air felt colder against his skin. As he turned the corner of a row of graves, he saw her. A little girl kneeling on the snow-covered ground, hunched over a simple headstone. No coat. No gloves. Bare feet pressed into the ice hard enough to leave tiny red marks behind. Her dress was thin and worn. Her hair tangled from wind and tears. She looked like winter itself had swallowed her and forgotten to let her go. Jonathan's heart slammed against his ribs. Children cry. He knew that. Children hurt. He understood that, too. But this was different. Her shoulders shook as she prayed, real shaking, not from cold alone but from grief too big for her small frame. He heard her whisper again. Other kids get presents, but I don't want anything big. She sniffled, wiping at her face with frozen hands. I just want a little Christmas gift. Something small. Something that says I'm not alone. Jonathan felt something break inside him. It was quiet, almost soundless, but he felt the crack all the same. It startled him so deeply he didn't breathe for a moment. He had heard crying before. He had heard pleading before. But never like this. Never from a child kneeling beside a grave, offering everything she had left to a world that seemed determined to forget her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a wilted yellow daisy, its petals limp, its stem bent. She placed it gently on the grave. Mama, it's Christmas. I hope you see me. Her voice cracked again. I don't know how to be strong anymore. Jonathan's grip tightened around the roses so suddenly that one of the thorns pierced his skin. Blood welled against the white snow, stark and bright. He didn't feel it. He only felt the ache behind his sternum, the ache he thought grief had dried out years ago. The little girl stayed kneeling, her breath shaky, her body trembling uncontrollably now. The wind whipped around her, but she didn't move. She didn't even flinch. Jonathan took a step forward. Then another. And the moment he approached, just a few feet away, she turned her head slightly, startled by the crunch of snow behind her. Her eyes were large and glistening, lashes wet with tears that hadn't yet fallen. She looked at him with a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and something even more heartbreaking. Hope. Hope so fragile it might shatter at a whisper. Jonathan lowered himself slightly, not wanting to frighten her. His voice softened, the way it hadn't in years. "Are you all right?" he asked. Her chin trembled. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she looked down again, hugging herself tighter. "I'm just cold," she whispered. "I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. Not even close. Jonathan glanced at the headstone. A small Christmas candle flickered in the snow, barely lit, struggling to stay alive against the wind. The name carved in stone froze him in place. Miriam Hale. His breath stuttered. Hale. He blinked hard, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something else. But they didn't. He read them again. And again. The world around him seemed to tilt. Hale. A coincidence, he told himself. A coincidence in a city where a last name was shared by hundreds, maybe thousands. But his pulse quickened all the same. He forced his voice to remain steady as he spoke. "It's too cold for you to be out here alone," he said gently. She shook her head quickly. "I'm not alone. My mama's here." She pointed to the headstone and her lip quivered. "I come every Christmas so she's not lonely." Jonathan swallowed hard. He could barely form words past the tightness in his throat. "How long have you been out here?" She shrugged, shivering violently. "A while. I needed to talk to her." "Where are your shoes?" Jonathan asked, his voice cracking despite himself. She tucked her bare feet under her dress as if trying to hide them. I didn't have any that still fit." Jonathan inhaled sharply. No child should ever speak that sentence. Not ever. He lowered himself further, now at her level. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "you'll freeze." She looked down again, embarrassed, wiping her cheek with her wrist. "I didn't want to bother anybody." Jonathan felt a rush of heat, anger, grief, protectiveness. He couldn't distinguish which. Perhaps all of them. "You're not bothering me," he said. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Snowflakes landed on her eyelashes. She didn't blink them away. Jonathan cleared his throat gently. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the grave, then back to him. She swallowed hard. "My name is," her voice broke. She steadied herself. "Ella." Jonathan nodded slowly, the cold biting at his face. "That's a beautiful name," he said. "Ella, what's your last name?" She looked down at the headstone again, her little fingers brushing over the carved letters as if drawing strength from them. "Hale," she whispered. The world stopped moving. Jonathan couldn't breathe. Hale. Ella Hale. His entire body went numb, not from the cold, but from the sudden realization that something impossible, something unexplainable, something he could not yet understand, was standing right in front of him. His lips parted, barely able to form the words. "What did you say your name was?" She looked up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "Ella," she repeated softly. "Ella Hale." And Jonathan froze. The roses slipped from his hand and fell silently into the snow. Jonathan did not feel the cold anymore. He did not feel the sting of the thorn in his palm, nor the weight of the snow settling onto his shoulders. Everything, the wind, the trees, the cemetery, slipped into a distant blur. Only one thing existed now. The name. Ella Hale. Those two words hit him like a lightning strike buried deep in the chest, a shock of recognition without explanation. A name he had whispered into empty spaces for years. A name he had said in prayers he no longer believed in. A name he once imagined printing on birthday cakes and school notebooks and tiny Christmas stockings. But never like this. He stared at her, this trembling little girl kneeling in snow, this child whose voice cracked like fragile glass, whose bare feet pressed into ice until they reddened, whose tears clung to her lashes as if afraid to fall. Ella. Hail, he repeated, his voice barely a breath. She nodded, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Yes, sir. Jonathan swallowed, the motion stiff and painful. You said that was your mother's name. Miriam Hale. Again, she nodded. She told me to keep her last name so I wouldn't forget where I came from. Jonathan closed his eyes, only for a second, but in that moment the ground beneath him shifted, old memories rattling loose like bones in a locked room. His sister. His ex-wife. The arguments. The night everything fell apart. He opened his eyes quickly, forcing the past back into its cage. Right now, all that mattered was the child before him. Ella, he said softly, steadying his voice, how long have you been out here? She hesitated. Since last night. Jonathan's chest tightened so sharply he almost doubled over. Last night. A snowstorm. Below freezing temperatures. A barefoot child alone in a cemetery. Sweetheart, he whispered, no one was with you? No one is waiting for you. Her lower lip trembled. There's no one left. Those 4 words shattered something in him. He knelt fully in the snow now, ignoring the cold creeping into his clothes. He was a billionaire, a man who had built skyscrapers, crushed competitors, controlled markets, but none of that mattered here. None of that meant anything to a tiny girl who had nowhere to go. Ella, he said slowly, you can't stay out here. You'll freeze. She blinked up at him as if trying to decide whether she was allowed to trust him. Her fragile confidence flickered like the candle beside her mother's grave, small, weak, but stubborn enough to stay lit. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. And I didn't want to bother anyone. Jonathan's throat burned. You're not bothering me. God, you're not bothering me at all. But he didn't say those words yet. He didn't dare push too hard. She looked like someone who had been pushed too many times already. Ella, he said gently, would you come with me? Just to get warm. She hesitated, fear and longing warring on her face. He softened his expression. I won't hurt you. I promise. She looked at her mother's grave again, brushing her fingers over the snow-dusted name carved into stone. Can I come back tomorrow to say good morning? Jonathan's heart twisted. Yes, he said. Every day if you want. She took a shaky breath and nodded. Jonathan reached out his hand. Slowly. Carefully. With a reverence he hadn't shown anything in years. Ella reached back. Her small frozen fingers curled around his. And in that moment, so quiet, so fragile, it felt as though the world exhaled. He lifted her gently, his jaw clenching when he felt how light she was. Too light. The weight of hunger. The weight of neglect. The weight of a child carrying sorrow far heavier than her tiny body could bear. Her legs buckled and she gasped as her bare feet touched the snow. Without hesitation, Jonathan swept her into his arms. She stiffened at first, surprise, caution, fear, but then slowly relaxed against him, exhaustion overtaking everything else. You're safe now, he murmured, not knowing why the words came out, only knowing they felt true. As he carried her down the path, Ella's head dropped to his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. Jonathan held her tighter, feeling a rising protectiveness he hadn't felt in years, not since the day he lost everything he once hoped to be. But deep in the quiet of his soul, something whispered. This isn't random. This is something else. Something calling you back. He didn't know what it was. But he knew he couldn't walk away. And if your heart is already breaking for this little girl, if you believe no child should spend Christmas alone in the cold, take 1 second to subscribe. It tells the world that kindness still matters. And it tells children like Ella, even in stories, that someone is listening. Jonathan reached his car and opened the back door, lowering Ella carefully into the leather seat. She winced when her feet touched the cushion, her skin raw, nearly frostbitten. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Just a moment," he said. He removed his gloves and slid them gently over her icy hands. Then he took off his wool scarf and wrapped it around her tiny shoulders. "You'll be warm soon," he assured her. Ella nodded weakly. "Thank you, sir." Sir. The word hurt him deeply, and he didn't know why. He shut the door softly and walked around to the driver's seat, feeling the ache in his chest deepen. As he started the car, he glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were half closed. Her body slumped. Her breathing slow and uneven. Too slow. Jonathan's heart thundered in fear. "Ella," he said urgently, "stay awake, sweetheart. You're just tired, okay? We're going to get you warm." She tried to nod. Tried to keep her eyes open. But the cold had drained every ounce of strength from her. Jonathan gripped the wheel harder. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know how she came to be alone. He didn't know why her last name was Hale, or why her presence felt like a ghost from the life he once imagined. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not lose this child. Not tonight. Not ever. Jonathan's hands shook on the steering wheel as he pulled out of the cemetery driveway. The luxury car's engine hummed softly, its heat blasting, but Ella's fragile breathing still filled the cabin like an alarm clock that refused to be ignored. He kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Her small body was curled toward the heater vent. Her face was pale beneath the dirt. Her lips were edged with blue. Every few seconds, her eyes fluttered open, then drifted closed again, as if she were fighting sleep with the last scraps of willpower her little heart had left. "Stay with me, Ella," Jonathan murmured. "Just stay awake a little longer." A child should never look that exhausted. A child should never have to fight that hard to stay alive. Jonathan pressed the accelerator harder. "Where's your home?" he asked gently, hoping to keep her conscious. She swallowed, her voice thin as thread. "Don't have one. Not anymore." Jonathan's breath caught. "But where have you been sleeping?" She hesitated, as if embarrassed. "Sometimes in the park. Sometimes under the bridge. When Mama got too sick, we stopped, affording places. After she went to heaven, I tried staying with people, but—" Her voice trailed off. No child should have to explain homelessness. No child should ever learn the rules of survival at 7 years old. Jonathan felt something inside him collapse, an emotion too complex to name, a mix of grief and fury, guilt and protectiveness. "Ella," he said carefully, "how long has it been since your mother passed?" She closed her eyes, her fingers weakly clutching his scarf. "Last Christmas," she whisper-sobbed. Jonathan nearly slammed on the brakes. Last Christmas. Exactly 1 year ago. The same day he buried his sister. The same day he stopped celebrating the holiday altogether. A year filled with mourning, for both of them, but separately. Alone. A child and a billionaire living 2 entirely different lives, yet suffering the same wound. Loss. Jonathan swallowed hard. "Were you with her when she passed?" Ella nodded slowly. "She held my hand. She said she was sorry. She said she tried to stay, but the sickness was winning." Tears spilled from her eyes and soaked into the scarf Jonathan had wrapped around her. "She told me to stay brave. And to find my daddy one day. But I never knew his name. Jonathan's heart lurched so violently he had to steady the car to keep from swerving. She never knew his name. Why would that line hit him like a blade? Why would hearing her say it feel like the wind had been knocked out of him? He exhaled slowly, forcing calm. "Ella," he said softly, "what did your mother tell you about him?" She blinked through her tears. "She said he didn't know about me. She said she left before he could. That it wasn't his fault." Jonathan's vision blurred for a moment. That is exactly what he had prayed to hear one day, after searching for a child he believed still existed somewhere. But he could not, let his mind go there yet. Too dangerous. Too hopeful. Too painful. "Did she tell you why she left?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Ella shifted uncomfortably, rubbing her arms for warmth. "She said someone didn't want me. Someone powerful. Someone who made her go. Mama said she wished she stayed, but she was scared. And sick. And alone." Jonathan gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. "Someone didn't want me. Someone powerful." A shadow moved through Jonathan's memory. An old argument, harsh voices, slammed doors, his mother's cold disapproval, his sister's desperate attempts to calm the storm. But he pushed it away. Now wasn't the time. Ella needed warmth, safety, and a full stomach before truth could be touched. He forced his voice gentle again. "Ella, what did you eat today?" She hesitated. "Nothing." His heart broke cleanly. "Yesterday." She shook her head. "Just snow." Jonathan inhaled sharply, the ache in his chest deepening with every word she spoke. "You won't ever go hungry again," he whispered, almost to himself. Her gaze drifted to the window, where snowflakes blurred into pale streaks. "Sir? Am I going to be in trouble? For letting you help me?" Jonathan froze. In what kind of world does a child fear punishment for being rescued? "No, sweetheart," he said firmly. "You're not in trouble. You're safe. Completely safe." She nodded and closed her eyes again. "Okay," she whispered tiredly. Jonathan's mansion appeared ahead, its warm golden lights glowing through the storm like a lighthouse calling a ship lost far too long at sea. As he pulled into the driveway, staff ran out, startled, confused, shocked, but Jonathan didn't wait for explanations. He grabbed a blanket from the trunk and lifted Ella into his arms, holding her close as if she were made of spun glass. "Prepare a guest room," he commanded. "Warm the bed. Get soup. Towels. Medical supplies. Now." No one questioned him. They had never seen him like this, not even after his sister died. Ella whimpered softly, burying her face into his chest. Jonathan held her tighter. "You're home now," he whispered. "For tonight, you're home." And somewhere deep inside his bones, a truth trembled. It felt right. Too right. Almost as if he had carried her long before this moment. The mansion doors swung open as Jonathan stepped inside, carrying Ella against his chest, the blanket wrapped tightly around her small, trembling body. Warm air rushed over them, but she didn't stir, not fully. Her head rested limply on his shoulder, hair damp with melted snow, eyelashes clumped together from crying and frost. His staff stood frozen. Maria, the longtime head housekeeper, pressed a hand to her chest. "Sir, is she?" "She's freezing," Jonathan said, his voice low, steady, but charged with something no one had heard from him in years. "Prepare the downstairs guest room. Warm it quickly. And get the doctor on the phone." Maria hurried away, her eyes shining with shock and worry. Jonathan carried Ella down the hallway, his footsteps echoing softly. Every portrait he passed, The grand oil paintings of Hale family ancestors, the framed memories of business milestones, the elegant decor, felt suddenly irrelevant. Out of place. Empty. This mansion had never felt like a home. But now, with a child sleeping in his arms, it felt as if it finally had a purpose. He reached the guest room. Staff had already placed warming blankets on the bed, turned on the fireplace, and positioned a heat lamp near the foot of the mattress. Jonathan lowered Ella gently onto the bed. She whimpered at the loss of warmth. "I'm right here," he whispered, brushing a wet curl from her forehead. Her skin was icy to the touch. The kind of cold that scared him. The kind that seeped bone deep. The kind that came not just from winter, but from nights spent alone outside, from hunger, from hopelessness. Maria returned with a bowl of warm water, cloths, and soft towels. "Sir, shall I?" "No," Jonathan murmured. "I'll do it." Maria stepped back, startled. Jonathan had never personally tended to anyone, staff, guests, even family, except his sister. Only her. Only the woman whose grave he had been visiting when he found this little girl. He soaked a cloth in the warm water, wrung it out, and gently pressed it to Ella's hands. She winced. "I know," he murmured. "I know it hurts." Her eyelids fluttered. "Sir." "Yes, sweetheart. Is it okay to sleep now?" The question struck him with force. How many nights had she stayed awake, afraid of the dark? Afraid of the cold? Afraid of not waking up? "You can rest now," he whispered. "You're safe." Her breathing deepened, but her grip on the blanket remained tight, as if afraid this comfort might disappear if she loosened her hold even for a moment. Jonathan washed the dirt from her face, her arms, her legs, revealing bruises that twisted something inside him tighter with every one he uncovered. Bruises on a child. A 7-year-old. "God," he whispered under his breath. What did she go through? Maria spoke gently from behind him. "Poor little angel, where did she come from?" Jonathan paused. Where did she come from? Why was her last name Hale? Why did everything he felt in her presence feel like a memory he couldn't quite reach? Before he could respond, the family doctor arrived. Jonathan stepped aside only far enough to give him space, but close enough to see every reaction. The doctor checked Ella's pulse, temperature, skin, reflexes. His brows drew closer together with each step. "She's severely malnourished," he said quietly. "And she has frostbite forming on her. Toes mild, but dangerous if untreated." Jonathan clenched his jaw so hard the muscles twitched. "She'll need warm fluids, high-calorie meals for several days, and monitoring around the clock. But," the doctor softened, "she's a fighter. She'll come back from this." Jonathan exhaled shakily. "Can she stay here?" he asked. The doctor looked at him, long searching, and nodded. "Honestly, Jonathan, this might be the safest place she's had in a long time." After the doctor left, and staff discreetly drifted away, Jonathan sat in the chair beside the bed and watched Ella breathe. Slow. Steady. Fragile. Alive. Her small chest rose and fell beneath the blanket he had tucked around her. Her hand, still faintly blue, rested on her stomach, fingers curled inward like a child too used to protecting herself even in sleep. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He shouldn't feel this attached already. He shouldn't feel this protective. He shouldn't feel this connected. But he did. And the ache in his chest wasn't going away. Hours passed. The fire crackled. Snow piled against the windows. And Jonathan remained at her bedside, unmoving, except to adjust the blankets or touch her forehead to make sure her temperature was rising. At one point she whispered faintly in her sleep, "Mama, Don't leave. Jonathan's heart twisted. He reached out and gently brushed her hair from her forehead. You're not alone anymore, he said softly, though she couldn't hear him. But he meant it. Deeply. Sincerely. Dangerously. As night deepened, Maria re-entered with a tray. Sir. I brought soup for you. You haven't eaten since morning. Jonathan shook his head lightly. I'm not hungry. Maria's voice softened. You can't take care of her if you collapse. Jonathan sighed, but accepted the tray. He took a few mechanical sips, his eyes never leaving Ella. She looks like someone you've lost, Maria observed gently. Jonathan stiffened. She reminds me of no one. Maria nodded, not believing him, but knowing his walls well enough not to push. After she left, Jonathan leaned back in his chair, staring at Ella's tiny face in the firelight. Why couldn't he shake this feeling? Why did her presence awaken memories he'd buried under work, power, and grief? Why did her last name echo inside him like a bell? Hale. Ella Hale. He whispered the name into the air. It tasted familiar. Heavy. Significant. He ran a hand over his face. No, he murmured to himself. Don't go there. Don't make this something it isn't. But part of him didn't believe his own caution. Not anymore. Around midnight, Ella stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy and confused at first, but slowly focusing. She blinked at the room, at the fire, at the soft blankets, then at him. You stayed, she whispered. Jonathan's breath caught. Yes, he said. I stayed. Ella swallowed. People don't usually stay. A knife twisted in his heart. Well, he said gently, I'm not most people. She gave him a tired, tiny smile. Mama used to say that. She said, the person who loves you never leaves. Jonathan stilled. That's a beautiful thing to say. Ella nodded weakly. She was beautiful, even when she got sick. Jonathan hesitated. Can you tell me about her? Ella's eyes filled with tears, not loud ones, not dramatic ones. The quiet kind. The kind that slide down the cheeks of children who have cried far too many tears already. She was kind, Ella whispered. Even when she was tired. Even when we had no house. She always told me stories. And she always said, she didn't want to leave me. But she couldn't fight anymore. Jonathan leaned forward. I'm so sorry, Ella. She looked at him, searching his face as though trying to see if he was safe to trust. Then she whispered, Sir, do you think God still listens? Even when it's Christmas? The question hit him like a blow. He swallowed. I think, sometimes he sends the right person at the exact moment you need them. Ella nodded slowly, as if trying to believe that. She yawned, small and soft. Sir, she murmured. Yes. Thank you for hearing me. Jonathan froze. Hearing her. Hearing her tiny prayer. Hearing her whispered plea in the cemetery. Hearing her cry like a child whose heart had grown tired. He didn't trust his voice, so he only nodded. Ella shifted slightly under the blanket. Sir. Yes, sweetheart. What's your name? Jonathan inhaled slowly. Jonathan, he said. Jonathan Hale. Ella blinked. Her little voice broke in surprise. That's like my name. Jonathan's heart thundered. She continued softly, Mama said I should keep the name Hale because it meant something. She said, it came from the man she loved. Jonathan went utterly still. But before he could speak, Ella's eyes fluttered closed again, exhaustion pulling her back into sleep. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, breath shaking. The fire crackled softly. The storm howled outside. And Jonathan whispered into the dim, warm room, softly, almost fearfully. "Who are you, little girl?" Jonathan didn't sleep at all. Hours passed, but he remained in that same chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, eyes fixed on Ella's small silhouette under the blankets. The fire threw soft gold across her face, revealing features he hadn't noticed before. The gentle slope of her nose, the curve of her chin, the way her eyebrows tilted upward with a familiar delicacy. Familiar. That word haunted him. Jonathan's sister, Vivian, always told him that the heart remembers things long after the mind forgets. And tonight, his heart was whispering things he wasn't ready to hear. When morning light seeped through the curtains, Ella stirred again. "Sir," she whispered, still half asleep. "I'm here," Jonathan said immediately, the words instinctive. Her small shoulders relaxed at the sound of his voice. "You stayed all night?" "Yes," he murmured. "I wasn't going to leave you alone." Ella blinked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite bear, gratitude mixed with confusion, the expression of a child who had learned not to expect anything good. "Thank you," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "Would you like breakfast?" Her stomach answered before she did, a low, aching growl. Jonathan managed the softest smile. "I'll take that as a yes." He called for food, oatmeal, eggs, toast, fruit, more than any 7-year-old could possibly finish, but that wasn't the point. The point was abundance. The point was giving a child something she hadn't had in a long time. Enough. When the tray arrived, Ella sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her limbs. Jonathan helped her adjust the pillows, careful not to overwhelm her. She took one bite of oatmeal, then another, slow at first, as if unsure she was allowed, then faster, like someone waking from hunger's fog. Jonathan watched quietly. Ella paused mid-bite. "Sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For eating too much." Jonathan's heart cracked again. "Ella, you don't have to apologize for eating." She looked down at her bowl, voice trembling. "Mama always said we should save food. In case there wouldn't be any later." Jonathan felt tears sting his eyes, sharp, sudden, unwelcome. He blinked them away before she could see. "You'll never have to worry about food here," he said gently. "Not ever again." Ella stared at him, as if testing whether she could believe words like that. Then she nodded, small, tentative. After breakfast, Jonathan stepped into the hallway to collect himself. His breathing was uneven. His thoughts raced with dangerous speed. He couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. The timing. The name. The connection. The way she looked at him. The way his heart responded. But feelings weren't proof. He needed answers. He needed something real. And only one person could have given him that truth, his sister Vivian. His chest tightened as he walked into her old study, untouched since her death. The air smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite candle scent. Her handwriting still marked the walls in framed quotes. Her shawl remained draped over her reading chair. Jonathan stopped in the doorway, trembling. "I wish you were here," he whispered. "God, Vivian. I need you." He walked to her desk, opening the drawer where she kept her journals. She wrote everything down: memories, secrets, advice, regrets. If anyone knew the truth about the woman he once loved, it was Vivian. He opened the journal from the year everything fell apart. Dates. Entries. Her neat handwriting flowing across the pages like calm water. His heart raced as he flipped through. "She came to me again today, pale, scared, pregnant. I tried to convince Jonathan, but Mother interfered." Jonathan froze. He kept reading. She said she couldn't stay. She said she would rather raise the baby alone than raise it in a house that didn't want her. His breath hitched. His vision blurred. The words felt like knives. He turned the page. And stopped cold. The next page had been torn out. Ripped cleanly. Deliberately. Missing. Jonathan's fingers trembled over the jagged edge. Someone had removed it. Someone didn't want him to know what Vivian wrote next. Someone wanted the past buried. His mother. The thought came so fast, so violently, that he gripped the table to keep steady. Before he could process the implications, soft footsteps approached. Ella stood in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket, blinking sleepily. "Sir," she whispered. I woke up and didn't see you. I got scared." Jonathan inhaled sharply, that protective instinct surging again, and crossed the room in 2 long strides. "You're safe," he assured her. "I was just thinking." She looked around the room. "Is this your mama's room?" "No," he said softly. "My sister's." Ella stepped closer to the desk, eyes falling on the open journal. "Did she write stories?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "She wrote everything." Ella traced the spine of another notebook. "Mama did too, but I lost her book." Jonathan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Ella." She nodded, tears gathering again. "I wanted to keep it forever. But some things disappear when you're on the streets." He crouched to her eye level. "Nothing about you disappears, Ella. Not your memories. Not your worth. Not your place in this world." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, with the honesty only children have, she whispered, "I feel safe with you." Jonathan's breath caught. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The words hit him with the force of destiny. Then she added softly, "And I don't know why, but I feel like I met you before." Jonathan froze completely. That sentence tilted the whole world sideways. He searched her small, earnest face. She wasn't lying. She wasn't imagining. Something inside her remembered him, not consciously, not fully, but in the quiet, instinctive way hearts recognize what minds forget. Jonathan swallowed, voice low and unsteady. "Ella, I need to ask you something." She nodded. He hesitated, choosing each word with care. "When you told me your last name, Hale, how did your mother explain it to you?" Ella looked down. She said I should keep the name Hale because it belonged to someone who loved her once." Jonathan felt the world tilt beneath him. Loved her once. His pulse hammered in his ears. He tried to speak, struggled, then finally managed. "Ella, why did she pick the name Hale?" Ella lifted her eyes, innocent and tired and unknowingly standing on the edge of unraveling a truth that would change everything. "Mama said," she whispered, "that Hale was the name of the man she wished could have been my father." Jonathan's heart nearly stopped. His hand tightened on the edge of the desk. Tears he didn't expect burned behind his eyes. A name. A whisper. A possibility too painful to hope for. Too impossible to voice. Yet undeniable. Ella watched him quietly, waiting. And Jonathan, breath shaking, voice barely there, whispered again, "Who are you, little girl?" Jonathan stood frozen in front of Ella, the torn journal page still trembling between his fingertips. Her tiny voice lingered in the room like a soft echo. "Hale was the name of the man she wished could have been my father." The words pressed into him with the force of a memory he had locked away, buried deep under years of denial and pain. He felt himself slipping backward in time, back to nights filled with laughter, promises, and the warmth of a woman he once believed he'd spend his life with. Back to the moment it all shattered. Back to the day she left without a word, or so he thought. Ella watched him with wide, searching eyes. "Sir," she whispered. "Did I say something wrong?" Jonathan dropped to one knee, steadying himself, steadying her. "No, sweetheart," he murmured. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're just telling the truth." She blinked, confused. "The truth about Mama?" "Yes." He swallowed. "About your mother, and maybe about me." Ella tilted her head. "About you." Jonathan hesitated. His heart was pounding, his thoughts racing, but he knew he couldn't rush this. He couldn't scare her, couldn't plant ideas where certainty did not yet exist. A child who had already lost everything didn't need false hope. So he breathed deeply and said, "Ella, did your mother ever tell you my first name?" She shook her head. She never said. She only said he didn't know she was pregnant. She said she left because someone made her go. Jonathan felt the breath punch out of him. Someone made her go. His gaze flicked to Vivian's journal. The torn page. His sister's warning. His mother's cruelty. The truth he didn't want to believe, but had always suspected. Ella stepped closer, reaching out to touch the journal with her small hand. "Was she your sister?" she asked quietly. Jonathan nodded. "Yes." "She looks kind," Ella whispered, tracing the embossed cover. "Mama would have liked her." He swallowed hard. She did. They knew each other. Ella's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes." The word came out heavy, loaded, trembling with unsaid meaning. Ella's brows pulled together. "Then, maybe my mama knew you too." Jonathan closed his eyes. This child, this innocent child, standing in his sister's study, with his family's last name, his ex-lover's features, and a past filled with shadows he never knew existed. Everything in him recoiled from the possibility, not because it frightened him, but because he wanted it too much. And wanting hurt. Ella tugged his sleeve gently. "Sir, are you okay?" He opened his eyes. "I'm trying to be," he said honestly. Her small hand slipped into his. And quietly, in the voice of a child who had been alone far too long, she said, "You don't have to be alone now." Jonathan's breath trembled. He looked at her, really looked at her, and the world seemed to tilt toward a truth he could no longer outrun. But he couldn't speak it yet. Not without proof. Not without certainty. Not without risking breaking her heart, and his. So he whispered, voice low and shaking, "Ella, I promise you, we're going to find out everything. Together." Ella's small hand remained tucked inside Jonathan's, her fingers fragile but warm now, warmer than last night, warmer than the cemetery, warmer than anything he had felt in years. It amazed him, how easily a child could offer comfort without even realizing she was doing it. He stood slowly, still holding her hand, still afraid that letting go, even for a second, might unravel something delicate forming between them. "Are you hungry again?" he asked softly. Ella nodded. A little. Her cheeks colored in embarrassment, and Jonathan shook his head gently. "You don't ever have to feel ashamed for being hungry," he murmured. "Not here." She gave him a small smile, so small, so hesitant, as if she had forgotten how smiles were supposed to feel on a child's face. He led her to the kitchen, where sunlight spilled across the marble counters like warm gold. The room, usually quiet and pristine, now felt alive, as if it had been waiting for the pitter-patter of small feet, the soft humming of a child, the presence of something innocent. Maria gasped when she saw Ella enter, cleaner now, wrapped in one of Jonathan's soft white robes, hair brushed into gentle waves. "Oh my goodness," Maria whispered. "Look at you, you look like a little angel." Ella blushed and hid behind Jonathan's leg. "It's all right," he said, nudging her gently forward. "Maria's kind." Maria quickly set a small plate of pancakes in front of Ella, with strawberries and honey drizzled lightly on top. Ella's eyes widened. "This is for me?" Jonathan nodded. "All of it." She sat at the counter, dangling her legs off the stool, her bare heels not even close to reaching the footrest. She took a bite, then a second, then a third, slower than before, savoring every taste. Jonathan watched her, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Purpose. Presence. But beneath that warmth, a deeper conflict stirred. He excused himself for a moment and stepped into the hallway, pulling his phone from his pocket. He dialed the private investigator he'd used for years, the one who had investigated corporate scandals, kidnappings, and lost persons. When the man answered, Jonathan's voice was low, controlled. "I need you to dig into something for me. Quietly." "What am I looking for, Mr. Hale?" "A woman named Miriam, connected to the Hale family through indirect ties, and a child named Ella Hale." There was a pause. Then, "Sir, I thought your search ended years ago." Jonathan closed his eyes. "It never ended," he whispered. "We'll start immediately." When he returned to the kitchen, Ella had finished half her pancakes, then set her fork down gently. She looked at him with an expression that struck him, those eyes, large and brown, full of something old and wise and hurting. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated, twisting her fingers together. "Why were you putting flowers on that grave yesterday? The one near Mama's?" Jonathan's breath caught. He sat beside her. "It was my sister's grave," he said softly. "Her name was Vivian." Ella's face softened. "I'm sorry she's in heaven." "Thank you," he whispered. "She was a good person." Ella nodded slowly. "I could tell. Her grave is pretty. You must love her a lot." Jonathan felt a lump rise in his throat. "I did. I do." Ella studied him quietly for a moment. "Does your heart hurt when you think about her?" she asked. Jonathan swallowed. "Yes. Very much." Ella looked down at her lap. "Mine hurts too. When I think about Mama." She lifted her eyes again, eyes shimmering not with fresh tears, but with deep understanding. "But it hurts less right now," she whispered, "because you're here." Jonathan felt something inside his chest melt and tighten all at once, a soft collapse, a painful blooming. He reached out, gently brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "You're not alone anymore, Ella." Her lip quivered, but she didn't cry. Instead, she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him, small, fragile, trusting. Jonathan froze. Then, slowly, he embraced her back. It wasn't the hug of a billionaire comforting a stranger's child. It was something else, something powerful, something terrifyingly familiar, something he had once imagined but never dared hope would come true. When she finally pulled away, she wiped her face shyly. "Sir, can I see the garden later? Mama loved gardens." Jonathan smiled softly. "You can see anything you want." Ella brightened. Then, innocently, unknowingly stepping on the edge of destiny, she added, "Mama said she loved someone who loved gardens too." Jonathan's breath stilled. His hands went cold. His heartbeat hammered. The house seemed to tilt toward her words. He whispered, unable to stop himself, "What did she tell you about him?" Ella shrugged softly. "Just that he had the same last name as me now." Jonathan's world narrowed to a single point. His voice barely escaped his throat. "Ella, what else did she say?" Ella looked up at him, wide-eyed, honest, unaware of the avalanche she had just triggered, and whispered, "She said he never stopped loving her." Jonathan felt the floor drop out beneath him. "She said he never stopped loving her." Ella's soft voice echoed in the warm kitchen, but the warmth didn't touch him. His hands went cold. His breath stalled halfway in his chest, refusing to move. He knew who she meant. He knew it with the kind of certainty a man feels only once in a lifetime, when the truth doesn't arrive gently but slams into him like lightning. But he couldn't accept it. Couldn't speak it. Not yet. Not while she was fragile. Not while he was unraveling. Not without proof. Ella took another small bite of pancake, unaware of the emotional earthquake she had caused. "Mama used to talk about him when she thought I was asleep," she said quietly. She'd whisper things like, "He didn't know, it wasn't his fault." Jonathan shut his eyes, pain surging up his spine. How many nights had Miriam whispered that into the dark? How many nights had she spoken to a memory of him, wishing things had gone differently? Ella swung her legs softly, staring down at her plate. She said she left because she didn't want him to choose between her and his family. And she said, Ella paused, thinking hard. She said she hoped he still had a good heart. The kind that never wanted to hurt anyone. Jonathan ran a trembling hand over his face. Miriam. Vivian. The torn journal page. His mother's cold, vicious words. Ella's last name. Ella's eyes. Everything pointed to one truth. But still, he couldn't let the thought take full shape. Hope was too dangerous. Too painful. Too fragile. Ella tugged gently on the sleeve of his shirt. "Sir, why are you sad?" Jonathan knelt beside her again, grounding himself in her presence, in her innocence. "I'm not sad, sweetheart," he said softly. "Just thinking." She tilted her head, studying him with those big, knowing eyes. "Mama said thinking too much makes grown-ups lonely." He huffed a broken laugh. "She was a very wise woman," he murmured. Ella nodded proudly. "She was. And she loved me a lot." Jonathan's breath softened. "I can tell." "And she said someone else would love me one day too," Ella added, a shy smile flickering like candlelight on her lips. "She said someone good would find me." Jonathan felt something in his chest break open, not painfully, but like a locked door finally unsticking after years of pressure. "Ella," he whispered, his voice cracking before he caught it. She blinked up at him. "Yes, sir." He reached out, cupping her cheek gently, carefully, reverently, as if she were made of something precious and breakable. "I promise you," he said, "you will never be alone again. Not as long as I live." Ella leaned into his hand instinctively, trusting, warm, fragile. "Okay," she whispered. "I believe you." Those words struck him with the force of a vow. She believed him. A homeless child. A grieving child. A child who had slept under bridges and eaten snow to survive, believed him. Jonathan stood slowly, realizing the next step was unavoidable. He needed answers. Real answers. Unshakable proof. He needed the truth that had been stolen from him, hidden, buried, ripped out of his sister's journal. He took a quiet breath. "Ella," he said gently, "would you like to rest a while?" She nodded sleepily. "I'm tired again. The warm bed makes me sleepy." He lifted her, and she wrapped her arms around his neck automatically, her head dropping to his shoulder. Jonathan held her close as he carried her back to the guest room, his grip firm, protective, terrified of losing her even for a moment. As he laid her down and tucked her beneath the blankets, she whispered, "Sir, you feel like someone Mama would trust." Jonathan's heart twisted so sharply he almost flinched. "I hope so, sweetheart," he murmured. "I truly hope so." Ella drifted into sleep, breathing soft and steady. Jonathan stood at her bedside, staring down at her small form. He could no longer deny what every instinct screamed. The truth hovered at the edge of his consciousness, close enough to touch, too dangerous to claim. There was only one way forward. One test. One answer. One moment that would either break him completely, or restore the part of his heart he thought was dead forever. He whispered softly, almost fearfully, "It's time to find out who you are." Jonathan stood in the doorway long after Ella had fallen asleep, the soft rise and fall of her breathing pulling at something buried deep inside him. The room was warm, the fire glowing gently, but a cold tremor moved through him anyway. He didn't want to disturb the peace she'd finally found, but he knew what had to happen next. The truth was no longer a distant ache. It was a pulse. A whisper. A possibility too real to ignore. Jonathan stepped into the hall and closed the door softly behind him. His footsteps echoed through the mansion, slow, heavy, deliberate, until he reached his private office. He shut the door, leaned against it for a moment, and allowed the emotions he had been holding back to rise. Fear, hope, grief, longing, and something else, something dangerous. He sat at his desk and lifted his phone with trembling fingers. The private investigator answered immediately. Mr. Hale. Jonathan swallowed. I need a DNA test arranged. Quietly. No labs with connections to my family, no leaks, nothing traceable. The investigator inhaled sharply. A child. Jonathan closed his eyes. Yes. And the possibility? Jonathan's voice cracked. She might be mine. Silence filled the line, heavy, stunned, reverent. Then, I'll send someone immediately. It will look like a medical check, nothing more. Jonathan exhaled shakily. Good. Thank you. He ended the call and pressed both hands to his face. A DNA test. One small vial of saliva could shatter him. Or save him. Or rewrite 7 years of grief. He whispered into the quiet room. Vivian, help me. Please. He didn't know if the test would give him hope or destroy it. He only knew this. He needed the truth. And he needed it now. The mansion felt different now, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jonathan paced the length of his office, glancing toward the hallway each time the wind rattled the windows. Any moment now, the discreet medical professional would arrive. Any moment, everything could change. He had faced hostile takeovers, billion-dollar negotiations, political storms. None of it had ever made him feel nervous. But this? This was terror wrapped in hope. At last, a soft buzz sounded at the gate. Jonathan's heart thudded. He opened the door before the man even reached it. The doctor, a quiet, middle-aged professional Jonathan trusted for confidentiality, entered with a small medical bag. Where is the child? He asked gently. Sleeping, Jonathan replied. And I want her to stay calm. She cannot know what we're testing for. Of course. Jonathan led him down the hallway, stopping outside Ella's room. The doctor entered first, moving with the careful, respectful quiet of someone stepping into a sacred space. Ella slept curled around the blanket, her tiny hand resting near her face. The doctor knelt beside her, speaking softly. She won't feel much. A simple cheek swab. Won't wake her. Jonathan watched from the doorway, jaw tense, arms folded, as the doctor brushed the swab against the inside of Ella's cheek. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. The doctor sealed the sample, placed it into a secure pouch, and handed Jonathan a second swab. I'll need yours too. For comparison. Jonathan hesitated only a fraction of a second before taking it. He turned away from Ella and swabbed his cheek, sealing the sample with hands that trembled despite years of perfect control. The doctor placed both samples into a temperature-regulated case. You will have results in 24 hours, he said. Maybe less. Jonathan nodded. No one else can know. No one, the doctor confirmed. He left quietly. Jonathan remained in the hallway long after the footsteps faded, staring at Ella's door. The silence around him seemed too loud, his heartbeat too strong. What was he hoping for? He knew the answer. He had known from the moment she whispered her name at the graveyard. He walked to the window overlooking the snowy garden, bracing his hands against the glass. His reflection stared back. A powerful man suddenly terrified of hope. He whispered into the cold pain. If she's mine. God, if she's mine. I will never let her suffer another day. His breath fogged the glass. And if she's not, I will still protect her. Because it wasn't just the possibility of blood that bound him to Ella now. It was something deeper. Older. Unexplained. A connection he couldn't break even if he tried. But as he turned away from the window, resolve forming in his eyes, he didn't know that the truth waiting for him would be far bigger than anything he'd imagined. Jonathan remained by the window long after the doctor left, watching snow settle over the garden he once designed for a daughter he never got to hold. The cold pressed against the glass, but inside the mansion was warm, warmer than it had been in years. warmer because of a child sleeping in a room down the hall. His heart wasn't used to warmth anymore. A soft voice broke the silence behind him. "Sir, are you okay?" Jonathan turned sharply. Ella stood in the hallway, wrapped in her blanket, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Her hair fell in soft curls around her face. She looked smaller than ever, yet braver than anyone he'd ever known. "You should be resting," he said gently, walking toward her. "I woke up," she whispered. "And I didn't know where you were. And I got scared again." Jonathan knelt down, pulling her into his arms without hesitation. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're not alone." She relaxed instantly, resting her head against his shoulder. "It's just, I always wake up alone." Jonathan closed his eyes, fighting the ache in his chest. "Not anymore," he whispered. "Not while you're here." She looked up at him, eyes wide and searching. "Will I stay here forever?" Jonathan inhaled sharply, not because he didn't want that, but because he wanted it so much it terrified him. "For as long as you need," he managed. "For as long as you want." Ella smiled, a small, tired, fragile smile, and leaned into him again. He carried her back to the guest room, tucking her beneath the blankets. She reached out a hand, catching his sleeve before he could stand. "Sir, can you stay a little? Just until I fall asleep." He sat beside her immediately. "I'll stay." She exhaled with relief, closing her eyes. After a moment she whispered, "If Mama had met you, I think she would have liked you." Jonathan's throat tightened. "I would have liked her too." "She was pretty," Ella murmured. "And she had a soft voice. And she said, the man she loved had kind eyes." Jonathan froze. Kind eyes. That was what Miriam used to tell him late at night, touching his cheek with fingertips filled with tenderness. "You see the world too gently," she'd laugh. "Too kindly for a man born into steel." Ella's voice drifted on. She said her heart hurt when she left him. She said she hoped he never forgot her. Jonathan clasped the blanket, knuckles turning white. Forgot her? He had never forgotten. He had searched until his search became grief itself. Until lawyers told him to let it go. Until doctors told him hope was delaying healing. Until his mother told him the woman had used him. Until his sister begged him to keep fighting, even when she no longer could. But what if Vivian's missing journal page had held the truth? What if someone tore it out to stop him from finding Miriam? What if? Ella's small hand touched his wrist again. "Sir, do you miss someone too?" Jonathan looked at her, this child who spoke like someone who had lived 1,000 years, this old soul in a little body, and he couldn't lie. "Yes," he whispered. "I miss someone very much." She nodded slowly. "Me too." Her lashes lowered. Her breathing softened. Sleep tugged her down gently, like a tide returning home. Jonathan stayed beside her until her breathing settled. Until her little hand relaxed. Until the weight of what she'd said sank fully into him. Then he rose quietly, stepping into the hallway. The investigator was already calling. Jonathan answered in one breath. "Tell me." "Sir, we tracked down Miriam's hospital records, her last residence, everything she signed. And there's something you need to know." Jonathan's grip tightened on the phone. "What is it?" "We found the name she listed as the father of her unborn child." Jonathan stopped breathing. Every sound in the world went silent. "Who did she name?" he forced out. The investigator exhaled softly. "You." Jonathan staggered back against the wall. His heart roared in his ears. His knees trembled. His vision blurred. The investigator continued. "She wrote, Jonathan Hale, he doesn't know. Don't blame him. Protect him." Jonathan's eyes burned. He pressed a hand to his mouth as grief, shock, and something deeper, something like joy suffocating under years of sorrow, surged through him. His voice broke. "And the DNA?" "Early indications, a pause, a breath, a final blow, are showing a very strong likelihood." Jonathan slid down the wall, sitting on the floor as his world realigned in an instant. His hands shook violently. His breath trembled. His heart cracked open. Ella Hale. His daughter. And she had prayed for a small Christmas gift. Without knowing, she had already found the biggest one she could ever receive. But the full DNA result, the confirmation, was still coming. And until it arrived, Jonathan could say nothing, could promise nothing, could claim nothing. All he could do was wait. And hope. And fear. The mansion seemed to pulse with that suspense, the trembling anticipation of a truth that had waited 7 long years to surface. Jonathan whispered into the quiet hallway. "Ella, my God. Ella." Jonathan did not sleep that night. He couldn't. He sat in his office chair watching snow swirl beyond the tall windows, listening to the quiet creaks of the mansion. The same mansion that once echoed with a sister's laughter, the same mansion that felt too large for one man's grief. Now, a child's soft breathing down the hall filled the home like candlelight. Every hour felt like a lifetime. Every minute a prayer. He replayed Ella's words in his mind over and over. Mama loved a man with kind eyes. She hoped he never forgot her. She wanted him to know, she didn't blame him. Jonathan pressed trembling fingers to his temples. Had fate ever been so cruel? Or so merciful? A little after dawn, his phone buzzed on the desk. A single message. From the doctor. "Results are ready. Answer when you're alone." Jonathan's heart lurched so hard it hurt. His breath trembled as he pressed call. The doctor answered immediately, his voice calm, steady, aware that what he was about to say would alter the course of a man's life. "Mr. Hale, the results are conclusive." Jonathan gripped the edge of the desk. "Tell me." A beat. A breath. A lifetime. "Ella is your daughter." The words didn't just land, they detonated. Jonathan's knees buckled. He sank into the chair, one hand covering his mouth as sound left him in a broken exhale. His chest heaved, and for a moment he couldn't breathe at all. His daughter. His daughter. The little girl who had cried beside a grave, asking God for a small Christmas gift, was his child. The child he had searched for. The child he had grieved. The child he had dreamed of. Gone, but now found again. Are you certain?" His voice cracked like dry wood. "Beyond any doubt. She is yours." Jonathan closed his eyes as a wave of emotion surged through him. Joy, heartbreak, fury, gratitude, grief, relief. They all collided in one overwhelming rush that left him shaking. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." When the call ended, he remained still for a long time, hands covering his face as silent tears slipped through his fingers. Vivian. His sister. The one person who would have fought heaven and earth to get Ella back to him. She had tried. She had carried the secret. She had protected Miriam. She had protected the child. And she had died before she could bring them together again. "Vivian," he whispered into the quiet room, voice trembling. "You kept your promise. Even from the grave, you brought her home." The grief was unbearable and beautiful all at once. He stood outside Ella's room for several minutes before he could gather himself enough to open the door. When he finally did, she was sitting up in bed, rubbing her eyes, her curls messy from sleep. "Good morning, sir," she said with a sleepy smile. He swallowed hard. "Good morning, Ella." She reached her arms out to him without hesitation. He lifted her gently, holding her close. She fit against him perfectly, as if she had always belonged there. "Sir," she said softly, "are you crying?" Jonathan pressed his cheek to her hair. I'm just very happy you're here." She leaned back to look at him, her expression curious, innocent. "I don't make people cry usually." He let out a shaky laugh. "No, sweetheart. You make people hope." She smiled, shy and earnest. "Mama said hope is brave." Jonathan felt his throat tighten again. She was right. He brushed hair from Ella's face and whispered, "Ella, I have something very important to tell you." She blinked up at him. "Am I in trouble?" "No," he said immediately, taking her small hands in his. "No, love. You didn't do anything wrong. This is something good. Something very good." She tilted her head. "What is it?" He inhaled deeply, committing the moment to memory. "Ella, your mother loved someone very much. A man she wished she could have stayed with. A man she hoped would find you someday." Ella's eyes softened. Mama said he was a good man. She said she was sad she couldn't tell him. Jonathan nodded, emotion building again. Ella, she couldn't tell him because he didn't know. Oh, Ella whispered. But he loved her too, Jonathan said, voice thick. And he never stopped looking for them both. Not for a single day. Ella's brow furrowed slightly. Did he ever find the little girl? Jonathan cupped her face gently. Yes, he whispered. He found her, last night. In the snow. Beside a grave. Praying for a Christmas gift. Ella stared at him. She wasn't confused. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't even surprised. Children have a way of recognizing truth before adults dare to believe it. She placed her tiny palm over his heart. Sir, she said quietly. Are you saying, you're my daddy? Jonathan broke. Not loudly. Not violently. Just, quietly, irrevocably. He nodded, tears slipping freely now. Yes, Ella. I'm your father. I always have been. I just didn't know how to find you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Ella didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, she leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. That's okay, she whispered. Mama said you had a good heart. And I think God wanted me to find you when you were ready. Jonathan sobbed into her shoulder, holding her as if the entire world depended on it. I love you, he whispered. More than anything. More than life. I love you. Ella squeezed him tighter. I love you too, Daddy. Daddy. The word was a miracle. But every miracle comes with a shadow. Jonathan knew what had to happen next. There were questions that needed answers. There were lies that needed confronting. There was a person whose cruelty had shaped years of loss. A person whose actions had torn a family apart. Jonathan's mother. The woman who had thrown Miriam out. The woman who had forced Vivian to keep secrets. The woman who had lied, manipulated, and controlled everything. The woman who had stolen 7 years from him, and nearly cost Ella her life. Jonathan placed Ella gently back in bed, promising breakfast soon. Then he walked out of the room with the slow, controlled fury of a man who had been denied too much, for too long. He went to the guest wing, opened the door to his mother's suite, and confronted her. She sat in her armchair near the window, sipping morning tea with the serenity of someone who had never imagined her sins would come knocking. Mother, Jonathan said quietly. She looked up, irritated at the interruption. Yes? What is it now? Jonathan stepped forward, his voice low, trembling, dangerous. You're going to tell me everything. Now. No lies. No excuses. She scoffed. Jonathan, I don't have time for theatrics. He slammed his palm onto the table. The teacup rattled violently. You threw Miriam out while she was pregnant. His mother paled. Jonathan, listen. You lied to me, he said, trembling with fury. You told me she left of her own free will. You told me she disappeared because she didn't care. Jonathan. You stole my child from me. The room fell into a heavy silence. His mother's breath shook. I was trying to protect you. From what? He snapped. From a woman who loved me? From a baby that was mine. She wasn't right for our family, his mother whispered. She wasn't suitable. Jonathan stared at her with the coldest expression she had ever seen. You destroyed a family for pride. She flinched. You let your granddaughter grow up homeless. She trembled. You let your daughter, Vivian, carry your guilt until she died. His mother covered her mouth, horrified. Jonathan stepped back. I will be civil, he said. But you will never make a decision in my life again. And you will not come near Ella until, and only if, she is ready. His mother bowed her head, her world collapsing. And Jonathan walked out without another word. When he returned to Ella's room, she was sitting up with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Daddy, she whispered. Jonathan's expression softened immediately. Yes, sweetheart. Are we going to be okay? He lifted her into his arms, holding her securely, protectively, lovingly. We already are, he whispered. We already are. She rested her head against his chest. It was Christmas Eve. There were no gifts under a tree. No sparkling lights. No music filling the halls. Just a father and daughter, reunited after 7 lost years. And sometimes, that is the greatest Christmas miracle of all. Before the credits roll, I want to speak directly to you watching this. If this story touched your heart, if you believe no child should ever feel forgotten, if you think every Ella in the world deserves warmth, love, and a chance at life, then let your voice be heard. Sparkles comment, every child matters, not for me, but for every little one who has ever cried in the cold. Sparkles, tap the like button if you believe kindness can rewrite destiny, just like it did for Ella. Sparkles, and if you want more stories where love triumphs over loss, hit subscribe. It costs nothing, but it tells the world you stand for hope, not cruelty, family, not abandonment, and healing, not heartbreak. Because somewhere out there, another Ella is praying for a miracle. And together, we make sure she's not praying alone.